close your eyes for just a moment. Take one breath. Can you hear it? That voice. The one that's been with you longer than any friend, any lover, any companion you've ever known. The voice that wakes up with you every morning and follows you into the darkness every night. You're not good enough. You should have done better. Everyone else has it figured out. Why can't you? Look at that mistake. Look at that flaw. Look at how you failed again. This voice doesn't shout. It doesn't need to. It's subtle, persistent, woven into the fabric of your thoughts. So seamlessly, you've stopped noticing it's there. You've accepted it as truth. You've believed that this harsh inner critic is somehow protecting you, motivating you, keeping you safe from becoming lazy or complacent. But here's what you haven't been told. This voice, this relentless judgment, this constant assessment of your worth based on impossible standards, isn't wisdom. It isn't discernment. It isn't even accurate. It's suffering. And the Buddha, 2,500 years ago, saw this pattern so clearly, understood it so deeply, that he built an entire path of liberation around freeing us from exactly this kind of pain. Tonight, you're not just going to learn about Buddhist teachings. You're going to discover something revolutionary, something that will change the way you relate to yourself for the rest of your life. You're going to learn that the harshest prison you've ever known is the one you've built inside your own mind. And you're going to learn, step by step, practice by practice, how to walk free. Because here's the truth the Buddha discovered beneath that Bodhi tree. The same truth every awakened being has discovered since. You are not your thoughts. You are not your critic. You are not the voice that judges. You are the vast, luminous awareness that can observe all of these arising and passing away, like clouds moving through an open sky. And when you truly understand this, when you feel it in your bones, everything changes. The criticism doesn't stop immediately, but it loses its power to define you. It becomes just another mental event, arising and passing. No more solid than a sound, no more permanent than a breath. Let's begin this journey together. Find somewhere comfortable. Let your body settle. Let your breath slow. And know that what you're about to discover isn't just philosophy. It's the key to the cage you've been living in. The door has always been unlocked. You just didn't know you had permission to walk through it. Until now. The Buddha himself knew this suffering intimately. Before he became the awakened one, before he sat beneath that tree and vowed not to rise until he understood the nature of suffering completely. He was Siddhartha. A prince, yes. Protected from the world's difficulties, yes. But also a human being who wrestled with the same fundamental questions we all face. Who am I? Am I enough? What does it mean to live a worthy life? We know from the text that even after he left the palace, even after he threw himself into the most extreme ascetic practices, fasting until his body was skeletal, pushing himself to the very edge of death, he was driven by a deep dissatisfaction with himself. The practices of his time taught that enlightenment came through self-punishment, through making the body and mind suffer enough that they would finally surrender to something greater. But here's what makes the Buddha's discovery so profound. After 6 years of this self-torture, starving himself, sleeping on beds of thorns, holding his breath until he passed out, he realized something that would revolutionize spiritual practice forever. The harshness wasn't working. The punishment wasn't leading to freedom. In fact, it was just another form of the same problem. He was still caught in the belief that he, as he was, wasn't acceptable. That he needed to become something different, something better, something more worthy of awakening. One day, weak and exhausted, he accepted a bowl of rice milk from a young woman named Sujata. And in that moment of accepting nourishment, of treating his body with basic kindness after years of cruelty, something shifted. He began to remember a moment from his childhood, sitting under a rose apple tree while his father worked in the fields. He'd entered a state of deep meditative absorption naturally, without force, without self-flagellation, just through being present, relaxed, and allowing his mind to settle into its natural clarity. That memory changed everything. He realized the path wasn't about destroying the self. It wasn't about hating your way to liberation. It was about understanding the nature of this thing we call self so deeply that you could finally let go of the endless war against it. That evening, restored and nourished, he sat beneath what would become known as the Bodhi tree. And instead of fighting himself, instead of trying to force his mind into some ideal state, he simply observed. He watched thoughts arise and pass. He watched sensations come and go. He watched the entire constructed sense of self appear and disappear, moment by moment, with nothing solid at its core. When he emerged from that night, he wasn't perfect. He was awake, and the difference is everything. Perfection is an impossible standard that keeps you forever striving, forever falling short, forever at war with reality. Awakening is seeing clearly what's actually here, understanding how suffering is created, and releasing the patterns of clinging and aversion that keep you trapped in cycles of self-judgment. The first teaching the Buddha gave after his awakening is recorded in what's known as the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the discourse on setting the wheel of Dharma in motion. And right at the heart of that teaching is this profound statement: suffering arises from craving and clinging. And what do we cling to most desperately? This idea of a fixed, permanent self that needs to be defended, improved, made perfect, made acceptable. Think about your own experience for a moment. When does the self-criticism arise most strongly? Usually when you feel this sense of self is threatened. When you've made a mistake that makes you look bad. When someone criticizes you and your constructed identity feels attacked. When you compare yourself to others and come up short. The voice gets louder. Not because you've actually done something terrible, but because your sense of who you think you should be has been challenged. The Buddha taught something radical about this. He taught Anatta, which is often translated as no self or not self. And this teaching has confused people for 2,500 years because it seems to contradict our most basic experience. Of course, there's a self. I'm sitting here thinking these thoughts. I have memories, preferences, a name, a history. How can the Buddha say there's no self? But that's not quite what he was saying. He wasn't denying that you exist. He was pointing to something much more subtle and much more liberating. He was saying that when you look closely, with clear, unwavering attention, you can't find a permanent, unchanging, solid self anywhere. What you find instead is a constantly changing process, a flow of thoughts, sensations, perceptions, impulses, and consciousness, all arising and passing away moment by moment, influenced by countless conditions. You are not your thoughts, because thoughts come and go. You are not your body, because the body is constantly changing, cells dying and being born, aging from moment to moment. You're not your emotions, because emotions arise and pass like weather. You're not your memories, because memories are constructed and reconstructed each time you recall them. You are not your personality, because personality shifts depending on context, who you're with, what role you're playing. So what are you? According to the Buddha, you're more like a process than a thing, more like a river than a stone. The river is real. You can see it, touch it, drink from it. But try to grab the river and hold it still. Try to say, this is the river, and it will always be exactly this, and you'll find it impossible. The river is always moving, always changing, always in process. That's what makes it a river. You are like that river. Real? Yes. Existing? Yes. But not fixed, not permanent, not needing to be defended or perfected or made into something other than what you already are in this flowing moment. And here's where it gets truly liberating. When you understand this deeply, not just intellectually, but experientially, the whole basis for self-criticism begins to dissolve. Because who is there to criticize? And who is there being criticized? There's just this moment's experience, this thought arising, this sensation present, this breath moving, all of it changing, all of it temporary, none of it solid enough to hang your entire sense of worth upon. The inner critic tries to convince you that there's a permanent you who is fundamentally flawed. But when you look with the clarity the Buddha developed, you see there's no permanent you to be flawed. There's just this moment's experience of self-judgment arising. And like every other experience, it will pass. It's not solid. It's not permanent. It's not truth. It's just another temporary formation in the endless flow of consciousness. This doesn't mean you can't learn or grow. It doesn't mean you don't take responsibility for your actions. But it means you can meet your mistakes, your imperfections, your humanity with curiosity and kindness, rather than harsh judgment. Because you're not trying to fix a permanently broken self. You're just working skillfully with the conditions that arise in each moment, cultivating what leads to well-being, and releasing what leads to suffering. This is the foundation. This is what the Buddha discovered that night beneath the tree. And it's what you can discover too. Not through 6 years of self-torture, but through the gentle, patient practice of observing your experience clearly and seeing through the illusion of a solid, separate, permanently defective self. Your thoughts are not you. Your critic is not you. You are the awareness in which all of this appears. And awareness itself has never been damaged. It's never been broken. It's never needed fixing. It's been here all along, spacious enough to hold everything, clear enough to see through everything, kind enough to embrace everything with compassion. This is where your freedom begins. There's a teaching at the heart of Buddhist practice that most people get backwards. They think it starts with compassion for others, with extending kindness outward to all beings everywhere. And while that is certainly part of the path, it's not the beginning. The Buddha, in his profound wisdom, understood something essential about human psychology. You cannot genuinely offer what you have never received. You cannot give from an empty well. You cannot extend true compassion to others if you've never learned to be compassionate with yourself. This is why Metta practice, loving kindness meditation, always begins with you. Not because you're more important than others. Not because Buddhism is secretly about self-indulgence or narcissism. But because you cannot skip this step. You cannot bypass yourself. If you try to love all beings while hating yourself, what you're actually doing is perpetuating the very violence you're trying to heal. You're just directing it inward instead of outward. And that internal violence will leak out no matter how hard you try to contain it. In the Metta Sutta, one of the most beloved discourses in the entire Buddhist canon, the Buddha describes how a mother protects her child, with her life if necessary, with fierce dedication, with unconditional love that doesn't depend on the child being perfect or well-behaved or meeting certain standards. The mother loves the child simply because the child exists. That's enough. That's always been enough. And then the Buddha says something that many people miss. He says we should cultivate this same boundless loving kindness toward all beings. But he doesn't say start with strangers or start with difficult people. The traditional practice, developed and refined over thousands of years, starts with you, because you are also a being. You are also worthy of this protection, this care, this unconditional regard. Yet when most people first encounter metta practice directed at themselves, something remarkable happens. Resistance, sometimes mild discomfort, sometimes full-blown emotional upheaval. They sit down, they try to offer themselves phrases like, "May I be happy, may I be peaceful, may I be safe," and something in them rejects it violently. A voice says, "No, you don't deserve this. This is selfish. This is wrong. Other people need it more than you do." This resistance is itself the proof that the practice is needed. If loving yourself came naturally, if you already had a healthy relationship with yourself, these phrases would flow easily. But for most of us raised in cultures that confuse self-worth with achievement, that tie love to performance, that teach us we have to earn our right to exist, self-directed kindness feels foreign. It feels dangerous. It feels like giving up, like lowering standards, like accepting mediocrity. But metta practice isn't about lowering standards or giving up. It's about changing the fundamental ground from which you relate to your experience. Instead of approaching your life from a place of deficiency, lack, and constant self-improvement projects, you approach it from a place of basic goodness, not perfection. Goodness. The recognition that your fundamental nature, beneath all the conditioning and patterns and mistakes, is workable, is worthy, is deserving of care. The great Tibetan teacher Pema Chodron tells a story about meeting with the Dalai Lama and other Western Buddhist teachers in the late 1980s. The Western teachers brought up something they were seeing consistently in their students. This pervasive self-hatred, this constant self-criticism, this belief that they were fundamentally flawed. And the Dalai Lama was genuinely confused. He had to have the concept explained to him multiple times, because in his cultural context, this kind of self-hatred wasn't common. The basic Buddhist worldview he grew up with assumes that all beings have Buddha nature, that everyone is fundamentally whole and capable of awakening. But in the West, and increasingly in globalized modern culture everywhere, we've been taught the opposite. We've been taught we're born sinful or defective. We've been taught we need to prove our worth. We've been taught that harsh self-criticism is what keeps us from becoming lazy or self-indulgent. And so we carry this crushing burden of never being enough, never doing enough, never being the person we think we should be. Metta practice directly confronts this lie, not through argument or intellectual understanding, but through the slow, patient cultivation of a different way of being with yourself. You sit down. You place your hand on your heart if that helps you connect, and you begin offering yourself phrases of loving kindness. Simple phrases. May I be safe. May I be peaceful. May I be healthy. May I be free from suffering. At first, these words might feel empty. They might bounce off the armor of your self-protection. But you keep practicing. Not because you have to feel anything particular. Not because you have to manufacture emotions that aren't there. But because you're training your mind in a new direction. You're creating neural pathways of self-kindness. You're teaching your system that it's possible, it's allowed. It's even beneficial to treat yourself with the same care you'd offer someone you love. And here's what begins to happen over time. The resistance softens. Not all at once, not in a straight line, but gradually, you notice moments where the phrases land differently, where "may I be peaceful" touches something real in you, where "may I be free from suffering" brings tears because you realize how much suffering you've been carrying, and how little permission you've given yourself to want relief from it. You begin to notice the difference between self-kindness and self-indulgence. Self-indulgence says, I'm going to do whatever I want, regardless of consequences, because I deserve it. Self-kindness says, I'm going to take care of myself because I matter. Because my well-being matters. Because I can't show up for anything or anyone if I'm running on empty. Self-indulgence avoids responsibility. Self-kindness takes responsibility from a place of care rather than punishment. Self-indulgence is reactive. Self-kindness is responsive. Self-indulgence makes excuses. Self-kindness makes space for growth without requiring you to be perfect before you're worthy of love. Research on Metta practice has shown remarkable results. People who regularly practice loving-kindness meditation show increased positive emotions, decreased symptoms of depression and anxiety, improved relationship satisfaction, reduced chronic pain, and even changes in brain structure that support emotional regulation and empathy. But beyond the research, beyond what can be measured, there's something even more profound that happens. When you genuinely learn to treat yourself with kindness, you stop being so afraid of your own imperfection. You stop needing to defend yourself constantly. You stop comparing yourself obsessively to others because you're no longer trying to prove you're good enough. You already know you're worthy of care simply because you're alive, because you're a being capable of suffering and capable of joy, because you matter in this vast web of existence. And from that ground of self-kindness, genuine compassion for others becomes possible. Not the forced compassion that's really just another form of self-improvement. Not the compassion that's secretly about being seen as a good person, but the natural overflow of a heart that knows how to hold suffering without collapsing, that knows how to offer care without conditions, that has practiced on yourself first and can now extend the same quality of attention and kindness to everyone you meet. The traditional Metta practice has 5 stages. You begin with yourself. Then you extend loving kindness to someone you love, easily. Someone who naturally evokes warmth in you. A teacher, a friend, a family member, anyone who makes your heart smile. Then you extend it to someone neutral, someone you see regularly but have no strong feelings about. The barista, the mail carrier, a neighbor you wave to but don't really know. This stage teaches you that everyone, whether you know them well or not, wants to be happy and free from suffering. Then comes the difficult stage, extending metta to someone you find challenging, someone who has hurt you, or irritates you, or brings up strong negative reactions. This stage isn't about condoning their behavior or pretending they haven't caused harm. It's about recognizing that they too are a being who wants happiness and freedom from suffering, and that their unskillful actions come from their own unhealed wounds. And finally, you extend loving kindness to all beings everywhere, without limit, without exception. But here's what many people miss. If you skip the first stage, if you can't genuinely offer yourself loving kindness, all the other stages become performance. You're going through the motions, but not actually transforming your heart. The practice becomes another way to be a good Buddhist, to check off the boxes, to prove you're spiritual and compassionate. But it remains superficial. When you truly start with yourself, when you let the practice work on the deepest levels of your being, everything changes. You're not trying to be compassionate. You're not working to cultivate loving kindness. It begins to arise naturally because you've stopped fighting the fundamental fact of your own existence. You've stopped the war. And where there was conflict, there's now space. Where there was judgment, there's now curiosity. Where there was harsh criticism, there's now gentle encouragement. This is Metta. This is the beginning of freedom. This is how you transform the relationship with the one person you can never escape. The one person who will be with you every moment from birth to death. Yourself. When that relationship changes, when it moves from hostility to friendliness, from violence to kindness, everything else in your life shifts in response. Because you can't hate yourself into becoming someone worthy of love. You can only love yourself into becoming more capable of love. That's the path. That's always been the path. The Buddha knew it. Every awakened being who has walked this earth has known it. And now you know it too. May you be safe. May you be peaceful. May you be healthy. May you be free from suffering. These aren't just words. They're a revolution. And it begins with you. Close your eyes for a moment and remember, not with your thinking mind, but with that deeper knowing that exists before words. Remember when you were a child, maybe 3 years old, maybe 5. Remember a time, even just a fleeting moment, before you learned to be ashamed of yourself, before you absorbed the messages about how you needed to be different, better, more acceptable, before the critic took up residence in your mind. That child, innocent and whole, is still here, buried under years of conditioning, yes, covered by layers of protective mechanisms, yes, but never destroyed, never actually damaged at the core. And that child never agreed to the harsh judgments you now level against yourself. That child never signed up for the constant self-criticism, the relentless assessment, the impossible standards. So where did the inner critic come from? Why does it have such power? Why does it feel so true when it tells you you're not enough? Understanding the origins of your inner critic isn't about blame. It's not about finding someone to be angry at or making yourself a victim of your circumstances. It's about seeing clearly how this pattern developed so you can work with it skillfully rather than being controlled by it unconsciously. Buddhist psychology, particularly the tradition called Abhidhamma, has a sophisticated understanding of how our minds are shaped by experience. The Buddha taught that we're not born with fixed personalities or predetermined patterns of thought. We're born with the basic capacity to experience pleasure and pain, to move toward what feels good and away from what feels bad. Everything else, all our habits of mind, all our ways of relating to ourselves and the world, develops through a process the Buddha called sankhara, which means formations or conditioning. Think of your mind like a path through a forest. The first time you walk through, you're pushing through undergrowth, making your way carefully, creating a trail. The second time, it's slightly easier. The path is a bit more defined. The 100th time, the 1000th time, you've created a well-worn path that you follow almost automatically. You don't even think about it anymore. Your feet just know where to go. Your patterns of self-criticism are like that. They're well-worn paths in your mind, formed through countless repetitions, reinforced by your environment, your culture, your family, your experiences, and they feel true because they're familiar. Not because they're accurate, but because they're what you know. For most of us, the critic begins forming in childhood. Not because our parents or caregivers were necessarily cruel or abusive, though sometimes they were, but because we learned, as all children must learn, that love and approval often come with conditions. When you behaved a certain way, you received warmth and affection. When you behave differently, you experience rejection or punishment, or the withdrawal of love. And children, being dependent and vulnerable, learn quickly. They learn to monitor themselves constantly, to adjust their behavior, their expressions, their very sense of self, to match what seems to earn safety and belonging. This is survival. This is adaptation. This is what we all had to do to make it through the vulnerability of childhood. But here's what happens. That external voice, the one that told you to be quiet, to be good, to be different than you naturally were, becomes internalized. It moves from outside to inside, and eventually, you don't need anyone else to criticize you. You've learned to do it to yourself. You've become your own guard, your own judge, your own executioner. The critic believes, quite genuinely, that it's protecting you. It thinks that if it can just criticize you harshly enough, you'll finally become perfect enough to be safe, perfect enough to be loved, perfect enough to belong. It doesn't understand that this strategy is fundamentally flawed, that you can't shame yourself into wholeness, that constant criticism doesn't lead to growth, it leads to paralysis. In Buddhist terms, the critic is operating from a fundamental misunderstanding, from avijja, or ignorance. It doesn't see clearly. It's caught in a delusion about how change actually happens, how humans actually learn, how love actually works. It's trying to solve the problem of your survival, using the same strategies that created the problem in the first place. This is important to understand. Your inner critic isn't evil. It isn't trying to destroy you. It's trying, in its limited and unskillful way, to keep you safe. It learned early on that if you could just meet certain standards, if you could just be acceptable enough, you'd be okay. And so it keeps trying to whip you into shape, to force you to meet those standards, to make you into someone who won't be rejected or abandoned or hurt. But it's operating on outdated information, the conditions that created the critic, the childhood circumstances that made constant self-monitoring necessary for survival aren't your current reality. You're not that vulnerable child anymore. You have resources now. You have choices. You have the capacity to see clearly and respond skillfully rather than react automatically. Culture plays an enormous role, too. We live in societies that worship achievement and productivity, that measure worth by what you accomplish, what you own, what status you hold. We're surrounded by images of perfection, by social media highlight reels, by advertising that constantly tells us we're inadequate and need to buy something to fix ourselves. We're taught that self-criticism is humility, that being hard on yourself is realistic, that if you're not constantly pushing yourself, you'll become lazy or stagnant. These are lies. These are collective delusions that cause immense suffering. But because everyone around us believes them, because they're woven into the fabric of our culture, we absorb them without question. Buddhist practice offers a radically different view. It says that your basic nature, what's sometimes called Buddha nature, is fundamentally pure. Not perfect, but pure, workable, worthy, capable of awakening. The impurities, the habits of self-hatred and self-criticism, are like mud obscuring a clear mirror. The mud is real. It needs to be cleaned. But it was never the mirror itself. It was never your true nature. This understanding changes everything about how you work with your inner critic. Instead of believing its stories, you begin to recognize them as outdated survival strategies. Instead of being controlled by them, you can observe them with some distance. Instead of identifying with the critic, you can see it as one voice among many, a part of your mind that's stuck in an old pattern. And here's where compassion becomes essential. When you understand that your inner critic developed as a survival strategy, when you see that it's trying, however unsuccessfully, to keep you safe, you can meet it with less hostility. You can say thank you for trying to protect me. I know you learned this was necessary, but I'm going to choose a different way now. I'm going to learn to meet my imperfection with kindness instead of cruelty. This doesn't mean the critic disappears overnight. These are patterns formed over decades. They have deep roots, but you can begin to relate to them differently. You can stop feeding them. You can stop believing them automatically. You can create space between the arising of self-critical thoughts and your response to them. The Buddha taught that everything arises dependent on conditions. Your critic arose dependent on certain conditions, childhood experiences, cultural messages, survival needs, and it will cease when those conditions change. When you no longer feed it with belief and attention. When you offer yourself a different response. When you practice again and again, relating to yourself with the kindness the critic never learned to offer. This is the path. Understanding the origins, seeing the patterns clearly, and then, with patient compassion, teaching yourself a new way. Not by fighting the critic, which only strengthens it, but by offering yourself what you actually need, what you've always needed. Genuine care, honest reflection, and the understanding that your worth has never been conditional. It's been here all along, waiting for you to recognize it. The Buddha sat under that tree for 49 days after his awakening, just letting the realization settle. When teachers finally approached him and asked him to share what he'd discovered, his first response was hesitation. Not because he was selfish or didn't care about their suffering, but because he understood something profound. The truth he'd discovered existed in a place before extremes, and humans have a strong tendency to swing to one extreme or the other. This is what he called the middle way, and it's perhaps his most misunderstood teaching. People think it means being moderate, splitting the difference, finding some bland compromise between extremes. But that's not it at all. The middle way is the razor's edge. It's walking a path that requires extraordinary balance, extraordinary discernment, extraordinary honesty. When it comes to how you relate to yourself, the two extremes are clear. On one side is self-indulgence, self-obsession, narcissism. The belief that you're the center of the universe, that your desires should always be met, that you never need to consider others or face your own shortcomings. This is the extreme of papering over everything, of never looking honestly at your mistakes or areas where growth is needed. On the other extreme is self-hatred, self-punishment, asceticism. The Buddha tried this one first. Remember, he nearly starved himself to death. He pushed his body and mind to the absolute limit, believing that suffering and self-denial would lead to liberation. But it didn't. It just made him weak and unbalanced. The middle way between these extremes is something much more subtle. It's the capacity to see yourself clearly, to acknowledge where you've acted unskillfully or caused harm, to commit to growth and learning, all while holding yourself with fundamental kindness. It's accountability without cruelty. It's honesty without self-hatred. It's the recognition that you can be both worthy of love and in need of growth at the exact same time. This is where most people get confused. They think that if they're kind to themselves, they'll lose motivation. They believe the harsh inner critic is what keeps them working hard, improving, striving. But research and experience show the opposite is true. Self-compassion actually increases motivation and resilience. When you're not terrified of failure, when making a mistake doesn't mean you're worthless, you're much more willing to take risks, to try new things, to push yourself beyond your comfort zone. Think about learning anything new, learning an instrument, a language, a physical skill. If every time you make a mistake, you tell yourself you're terrible, you'll never learn, you should just give up, how long before you quit? How much energy goes into defending yourself from your own attacks instead of actually focusing on learning? But if you can make a mistake and simply think, okay, that didn't work. Let me try a different approach. What can I learn from this? Everything changes. The mistake becomes information instead of evidence of your inadequacy. The middle way applied to self-relationship looks like this. You do something that hurts someone you care about. Maybe you say something sharp out of tiredness or stress. The self-indulgent extreme says it's fine. They're being too sensitive. You didn't mean it, so it doesn't matter. This denies responsibility and prevents learning. The self-punishing extreme says, you're terrible. You always do this. You ruin everything. You don't deserve to be loved. This creates so much suffering that you can't actually learn from the situation or repair the harm. The middle way says, I did something unskillful. This action didn't align with my values. It caused hurt. I can acknowledge that fully without making it mean I'm fundamentally broken. I can apologize genuinely, make amends where possible, and learn what conditions led to this so I can make different choices next time. There's clarity here, there's responsibility, but there's no self-destruction. In the Buddhist text called the Vitakkasanthana Sutta, the discourse on the relaxation of thoughts, the Buddha gives practical instructions for working with difficult mental states. He doesn't say suppress them or pretend they're not there. But he also doesn't say indulge them or believe everything they tell you. Instead, he teaches a middle way of working with thoughts. He says, when an unskillful thought arises, one that leads to harm or suffering, first, try replacing it with a more skillful thought. If that doesn't work, examine the danger and drawbacks of the unskillful thought. If that doesn't work, try to forget it, to turn your attention elsewhere. If that doesn't work, relax the formation of thoughts. Slow down the mental proliferation. And if that doesn't work, literally press your tongue against the roof of your mouth and restrain the mind forcefully. But he makes clear this last option is a last resort, used only when gentler methods have failed. This progression shows the middle way in action. Start with the gentlest, most skillful approach. Only use force when absolutely necessary. And even then, it's a temporary measure, not a permanent strategy. Apply this to self-critical thoughts. When that voice says you're not good enough, first try offering a more skillful perspective. You're learning. You're growing. This is part of being human. If the criticism persists, examine what it's actually accomplishing. Is harsh self-judgment helping you grow, or just making you suffer? If it continues, turn your attention to something else. You don't have to engage with every thought that arises. If it's still there, relax, breathe. Let the thought storm calm itself. And only if none of that works, only in extreme cases, firmly say, no. I'm not going down this path right now. The key is always starting with kindness, with gentleness, with the lightest possible touch. The critic wants to be heavy-handed. It wants to grab you by the throat and shake you into submission. But the middle way says there's almost always a gentler option. And the gentle option, over time, is what actually creates sustainable change. Another aspect of the middle way is understanding the difference between healthy shame and toxic shame. Buddhist psychology recognizes something called hiri and Anatta, often translated as moral shame and moral dread. These are considered beautiful qualities, wholesome states of mind. Hiri is the sense of conscience that arises when you've acted in a way that violates your own values. Anatta is the healthy concern for consequences that makes you pause before acting harmfully. These are different from toxic shame. Healthy shame says, this action doesn't align with who I want to be. I can do better. It's specific, action-focused, and motivating. Toxic shame says, I am bad. My existence is flawed. There's something fundamentally wrong with me. It's global, identity-focused, and paralyzing. The middle way navigates between never feeling appropriate remorse for harmful actions and drowning in identity-level shame that makes you feel irredeemably defective. You can feel the healthy pang of hiri when you've acted unskillfully without spiraling into the bottomless pit of toxic shame that says you're worthless. This requires practice. It requires developing what the Buddha called yoniso manasikara, wise attention or skillful reflection. You learn to notice when your thinking is helping you learn and grow versus when it's just creating more suffering. You learn to distinguish between the voice of wisdom, which is firm but kind, and the voice of the critic, which is harsh and absolutist. The middle way is not easy. It would be simpler to just swing to one extreme or the other, to either completely dismiss all self-reflection or to completely believe every critical thought. But the middle way asks you to be more conscious, more present, more discerning, to hold the paradox that you are both whole and growing, both worthy and imperfect, both fundamentally okay and still learning. This is the path the Buddha walked. This is the path he taught. And this is the path that actually leads to freedom. Not the freedom of never making mistakes or being criticized, but the freedom of meeting every experience, including your own imperfection, with clarity, compassion, and the confidence that you are workable, you are worthy, and you are capable of awakening. May you find this balance. May you walk this middle path with the steadiness of someone who knows their worth doesn't depend on perfection. May you be free. There's a practice in Zen Buddhism called shikantaza, just sitting. You sit on your cushion, you maintain awareness, but you're not doing anything. You're not trying to get somewhere or achieve something or become someone better. You're just sitting, being present to this moment exactly as it is. This sounds simple. It's not. Because the moment you start actually paying attention to your experience, you realize there's a nearly constant stream of mental activity, and a huge portion of that activity is commentary about you. You're sitting there, and your mind is already judging how you're sitting. You're trying to be present, and there's a voice evaluating whether you're doing it right. You're attempting to just be, and there's endless analysis about whether you're being enough, being correctly, being the way you should be. This is what the Buddha was pointing to when he taught about the nature of thoughts. They arise. They're not you. They're events in consciousness, temporary formations, like everything else. But we've become so identified with our thoughts, particularly our thoughts about ourselves, that we confuse the commentary for reality. Satipatthana, the establishment of mindfulness, is the Buddha's systematic training in learning to observe your experience without getting lost in it. There are 4 foundations of mindfulness: mindfulness of body, mindfulness of feelings or feeling tones, mindfulness of mind states, and mindfulness of mental objects or patterns of thought. When you apply this practice specifically to the inner critic, to those self-judgmental thoughts that arise again and again, something profound can happen. Let's start with the most basic level, simply noticing when self-critical thoughts arise. This sounds obvious, but most of the time we don't notice. We're so merged with the critic's voice that we don't see it as one voice among many. We just experience it as reality, as truth, as the way things are. So the first practice is radical, almost shocking, in its simplicity. Notice. When that thought arises that says you're not good enough, notice it. When the voice starts cataloging your failures, notice it. When the judgment comes that you should be different, better, more than you are, notice it. In traditional noting practice, you might silently label what's arising, judging, comparing, criticizing. You're not trying to stop the thoughts or make them go away. You're just acknowledging them. Oh, there's a self-critical thought. There's another one. And another. You might be shocked by how frequent they are. Like background noise you've stopped hearing because it's been playing your whole life. This noticing creates space, the tiniest bit of daylight between you and the thought. Before, there was just you thinking you're not good enough. Now there's you, the awareness, observing a thought that says you're not good enough. This distinction is everything. The thought no longer has automatic authority. It's no longer the final word on reality. It's just a thought, arising and passing like any other mental event. As you practice this, you begin to recognize patterns. Maybe the critic is loudest in the morning. Maybe it intensifies when you're tired or hungry. Maybe it has certain favorite themes, your appearance, your productivity, your relationships. Maybe it sounds like a specific person from your past, a parent or teacher, or authority figure whose voice you internalized. This recognition is important because it helps you see that these thoughts aren't actually objective assessments of your worth. They're conditioned patterns. They have causes and conditions. They arise when certain circumstances are present, and they will change when those circumstances change. The next layer is examining the effect these thoughts have, not theoretically, but experientially. When that self-critical thought arises, what happens in your body? Does your chest tighten? Do your shoulders rise? Does your breath become shallow? What happens to your energy? Does it drain away? Does motivation collapse? What happens to your emotional state? Does sadness arise? Anxiety? A desperate need to fix yourself, or prove yourself, or hide? When you really pay attention to the cost of self-criticism, when you feel it in your body, in energy and emotions, something important happens. You stop wanting to feed it. Not because someone told you should stop, but because you've seen clearly what it's doing to you. It's like touching a hot stove. Once you feel the burn, you naturally pull your hand back. You don't need a philosophical argument about why touching hot stoves is unwise. This is what the Buddha meant by wise reflection. He taught that you should look at anything you're unsure about and ask, does this lead to my long-term welfare and happiness? Does this lead to my harm? When you apply this to self-criticism, the answer becomes clear. Short-term, maybe you feel a little more motivated by fear. But long-term, self-criticism leads to suffering. It doesn't lead to sustainable growth or genuine well-being. It just creates more suffering. The third layer is beginning to relate differently to the thoughts when they arise. Instead of believing them automatically, you can bring curiosity to them. Instead of taking them as truth, you can investigate them. Is this thought actually accurate? Is there evidence for and against it? Is this thought helpful? Is it motivating skillful action, or just creating suffering? Is this thought kind? Would I say this to someone I care about? Sometimes you'll find that beneath the harsh criticism, there's a legitimate concern. Maybe you did act in a way that wasn't aligned with your values. Maybe there is something you want to change, or learn, or develop. But the critic has distorted this genuine feedback into a global attack on your worth, so you can extract what's useful, the specific feedback about a specific action, and let the rest go. The Buddha gave a simile about this. He said when you're searching for gold, you have to sift through a lot of mud and gravel. You don't keep the mud. You keep the gold. The same is true with your thoughts. When a self-critical thought arises, you can sift through it. Is there gold here? Is there something genuinely useful? If so, you keep that. The rest, the harsh tone, the global judgments, the unnecessary suffering, you let that wash away. But here's what's crucial. You do all of this with kindness. You don't make the critic into another enemy. You don't hate yourself for being self-critical, which is just another loop of the same pattern. Instead, you recognize that the critic developed for a reason. It was trying to help. It just doesn't have very skillful methods. So you can thank it for its concern and offer it a different way. A practice many people find helpful is actually dialoguing with the inner critic. You might sit down and ask it directly, what are you afraid will happen if you stop criticizing me? What are you trying to protect me from? And then listen. Really listen. You might discover that beneath the harsh voice is genuine fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of failure. Fear of being hurt or abandoned. The critic believes that if it can just make you perfect enough, you'll be safe. When you understand this, compassion can arise. Not agreement with the critic's methods, but compassion for the fear that's driving it. And from that compassion, you can offer reassurance. I understand you're afraid, but this constant criticism isn't actually keeping me safe. It's just making me suffer. I'm going to find a different way to take care of myself, and I'm going to be okay. Over time, with consistent practice, the relationship with your inner voice transforms. The critic doesn't disappear entirely, but it loses its authority. It becomes background noise that you can choose whether or not to engage with. And more importantly, a different voice begins to emerge or to be uncovered. The voice of wisdom, the voice of genuine care, the voice that can be both honest and kind, that can acknowledge mistakes without making them mean you're irredeemable, that can encourage growth without requiring you to be perfect first. This is what mindfulness of the inner voice offers you. Not the silencing of all self-reflection, but the development of discernment, the capacity to hear what's actually useful and let the rest pass, the freedom to be aware of self-critical thoughts without being controlled by them, the peace that comes from finally recognizing that you are not that voice. You are the awareness that contains it, and awareness itself has never been damaged by any thought that has ever arisen in it. Breathe, notice, and let the voice be just one more sound in the vast sky of your consciousness. You are so much bigger than it ever told you you were. Think about the last time you made a real mistake. Not a trivial one, but something that mattered. Something where you hurt someone you care about, or violated your own values, or failed at something important to you. What happened immediately after? For most people, there's a cascade of self-judgment that happens so fast, so automatically, that it feels like one unified experience. But if you slow it down, if you examine it carefully, you'll find several distinct stages. First, there's the recognition that something went wrong. This is just information, factual, neutral. Then, almost instantly, there's evaluation. This was bad. I shouldn't have done this. Then comes the identity level conclusion. I am bad. I'm the kind of person who does this. I'm flawed, broken, worthless. And, finally, there's the emotional flooding. Shame, guilt, anxiety, despair. All of this can happen in a fraction of a second. But here's what the Buddha understood that most of us miss. Only the first stage, the recognition that something went wrong, is actually necessary. All the rest is what he called papanka, mental proliferation, the mind spinning endless stories and elaborations around a simple fact. And it's in that proliferation that suffering multiplies. The Buddha made a distinction in his teachings that's absolutely critical for working with mistakes and self-judgment. He talked about kusala and akusala, which are usually translated as skillful and unskillful, or wholesome and unwholesome. This is very different from the language of good and bad, right and wrong, that most of us grew up with. When you think in terms of good and bad, you're making a judgment about essential nature. Good people do good things. Bad people do bad things. If you do something bad, it means you are bad. This creates an identity level crisis every time you make a mistake. But when you think in terms of skillful and unskillful, you're making an assessment about whether an action leads toward well-being or toward suffering. Skillful actions lead toward less suffering and more freedom. Unskillful actions lead toward more suffering and less freedom. This shift in language might seem subtle, but it changes everything. When you do something unskillful, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means you acted in a way that creates suffering probably because you are operating from ignorance or reactivity or old conditioning. You can acknowledge this fully. You can feel appropriate remorse. You can commit to learning and doing better. But you don't have to make it mean something global about your worth as a human being. Think about learning to play an instrument. When you first start, you make mistakes constantly. Wrong notes, bad rhythm, awkward technique. Do you think I'm a bad person? I'm terrible, I should quit? Maybe sometimes, if you've internalized shame around making mistakes. But more naturally, you think, okay, that was unskillful. Let me try again. What can I adjust? The Buddha is inviting you to bring that same quality of mind to all of your mistakes, including the big ones, including the ones that really matter. Not minimizing them or pretending they don't count, but meeting them with curiosity and commitment to growth, rather than with crushing self-judgment. In the Abhidhamma, Buddhist psychology, there's a detailed exploration of mental factors, the different qualities of mind that can be present in any moment of consciousness. Self-criticism is associated with what are called unwholesome factors: aversion, delusion, restlessness. When you're caught in harsh self-judgment, you're pushing against reality, creating tension and suffering. But there's another way to respond to mistakes that's associated with wholesome factors: clear knowing, energy, investigation, tranquility. Instead of aversion toward yourself, there's acceptance of what is combined with wise discernment about how to move forward. Instead of delusion, there's clarity about causes and conditions. Instead of restlessness, there's calm investigation. This isn't about suppressing remorse or bypassing accountability. When you act in ways that cause harm, some degree of remorse is appropriate and healthy. It's what the Buddha called hiri, the moral sensitivity that helps you align your actions with your values. But there's a world of difference between healthy remorse that leads to learning and toxic shame that leads to paralysis. Healthy remorse is specific. I said something unkind. Toxic shame is global. I am unkind. Healthy remorse is temporary. I feel regret about this action, and I will make amends and do better. Toxic shame is permanent. I am fundamentally flawed and always will be. Healthy remorse motivates repair and growth. Toxic shame motivates hiding and self-attack. The practice is learning to separate these. When you've acted unskillfully, you can acknowledge it with clear seeing. Yes, that action caused harm. Yes, I want to do better. Yes, I need to make amends where possible. And then you can let it go. Not suppress it or deny it, but genuinely release it once you've learned what you need to learn from it. The Buddha told a story about a man who was struck by an arrow. If a second arrow then struck him in the same place, the pain would be much worse than just the first arrow alone. He used this as a metaphor for how we create suffering. The first arrow is the inevitable difficulties of life: getting sick, aging, losing things we care about, making mistakes. We don't have much control over the first arrow. But the second arrow, the one we shoot into ourselves through our reactions, that one is optional. When you make a mistake, that's the first arrow. It hurts. There are consequences. That's reality. But when you then attack yourself with harsh judgment, spiral into shame, make it mean you're worthless, that's the second arrow. And often the second arrow causes far more suffering than the first one ever did. Research on self-compassion, pioneered by psychologist Kristen Neff, has shown that people who treat themselves with kindness when they fail are actually more likely to take responsibility for their mistakes, more likely to apologize and make amends, and more likely to learn and change their behavior. This is exactly opposite to what most people fear. They think if they're not harsh with themselves, they won't be motivated to change. But the research and the Buddha's teachings both say the opposite is true. When you're drowning in shame and self-hatred, you don't have the emotional resources to actually learn from your mistakes. You're too busy defending yourself from your own attacks. You're too overwhelmed to think clearly. You're too collapsed to take effective action. But when you can meet a mistake with, yes, I did this, and it was unskillful, and I'm going to learn from it, you have all your resources available. You can think clearly. You can feel appropriate remorse without being destroyed by it. You can take action to repair harm and prevent the same mistake from happening again. This is what the Buddha meant when he taught the middle way. Not indulging mistakes or pretending they don't matter, but also not using them as ammunition against yourself. Meeting them with clear seeing, appropriate response, and fundamental kindness toward yourself as someone who is learning, as all humans are always learning. A practice you can do when you've made a mistake is what could be called conscious processing. Instead of either avoiding the mistake or drowning in shame about it, you create time and space to actually learn from it. You might sit down with a journal and ask yourself a series of questions. What exactly happened? Just the facts, no judgments yet. What was I feeling or needing in the moment I acted that way? This isn't excuse making. It's understanding the conditions that led to the unskillful action. What was the impact of my action? On others? On myself? Again, just clear seeing, not self-flagellation. What do I wish I had done instead? What would a skillful response have looked like? What can I learn from this? How can I set myself up to make a different choice next time? What amends do I need to make? What repair is possible? And finally, what do I need to release? What second arrows am I shooting that aren't helpful? When you work through this process with honesty and kindness, something alchemical happens. The mistake transforms from evidence of your worthlessness into information you can use. The pain of it doesn't disappear, but it becomes meaningful pain, the pain of growth, rather than meaningless suffering, the pain of self-attack. The Buddha taught that all suffering is workable. Not that it will necessarily disappear, but that you can work with it skillfully. You can learn from it. You can let it refine you, rather than destroy you. Your mistakes, your imperfections, your humanity, these aren't obstacles to your awakening. They're the very material you work with. They're the laboratory where you learn compassion, wisdom, and the capacity to hold all of life with an open heart. So the next time you mess up, and you will, because you're human, and that's what humans do, try meeting it differently. Try skipping the second arrow. Try saying, yes, I did something unskillful. What can I learn? What needs to happen next? And notice how that simple shift from self-judgment to wise discernment changes everything. You are learning. You have always been learning. And you will continue learning until your very last breath. That's not a problem. That's the point. Welcome to being human. Welcome to the path. If you enjoyed this exploration and found it helpful, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these teachings reach more people who need them. And consider sharing this with someone who might benefit from a more compassionate relationship with themselves. Thank you for walking this path with me tonight. May you rest in peace. May you know your worth. May you meet yourself with the kindness you deserve. Your body knows. It's been keeping score this whole time, recording every harsh word you've spoken to yourself, storing every moment of rejection, holding every instance where you pushed it beyond its limits or denied its needs. The body remembers. And most of what we call self-criticism isn't just happening in the mind. It's happening in flesh and bone, in muscle tension and shallow breath, in the exhaustion that no amount of sleep can cure. The Buddha taught that the body is the first foundation of mindfulness for a reason, not because it's less important than the mind, but because it's more fundamental. Your mind can spin endless stories and philosophies, but your body is always here, always now, always telling you the truth if you're willing to listen. In the Kayagata Sati Sutta, the discourse on mindfulness of the body, the Buddha describes the body as precious, as worthy of careful attention and respect. He doesn't teach hatred of the body or transcendence of the body. He teaches intimate familiarity with the body, deep understanding of the body, and appropriate care for the body as the vehicle through which all practice happens. Yet most of us have a relationship with our bodies that ranges from neglect to outright hostility. We criticize our appearance constantly. We push through pain and exhaustion. We ignore signals of hunger, thirst, need for rest. We treat our bodies like machines that should perform perfectly, regardless of how we treat them. And when they don't, when they get sick or tired or show signs of aging, we judge them harshly. Stupid body, weak body, ugly body. This body that's failing me. But here's what the Buddha understood. Your body isn't failing you. You've been failing your body by treating it with contempt instead of respect, by demanding perfection from something that was never meant to be perfect, only alive, only functional, only doing its very best to keep you going day after day, despite all the ways you push it and ignore it and speak to it with cruelty. Consider this for a moment. Your body is working right now to keep you alive. Your heart is beating without you telling it to, about 100,000 times today alone. Your lungs are breathing. Your cells are producing energy. Your immune system is fighting off countless potential threats. Your body is doing all of this automatically, tirelessly, whether you appreciate it or not, whether you're kind to it or not. And how do you thank it? By hating how it looks in the mirror, by cursing it for being tired after you've pushed it past its limits, by feeding it poorly, resting it insufficiently, and then blaming it for not performing better. Imagine treating a friend this way. Imagine demanding constant service while offering nothing but criticism in return. That friendship wouldn't last, but your body has no choice. It will keep serving you, keep trying its best, until the very last moment. Buddhist practice invites you into a radically different relationship with your body. Not worship of the body, or obsession with the body, but genuine partnership with the body. Recognition that you and your body are not separate. You are your body. Your body is you. There's no division, no hierarchy where mind is superior and body is inferior. There's just this living, breathing, constantly changing process we call the human being. This means that healing your relationship with your body is essential to healing self-criticism. You can't genuinely love yourself while hating your body. You can't claim to be practicing self-compassion while treating your physical form with contempt. The body is where self-love becomes real, becomes tangible, becomes something more than just nice thoughts. So how do you begin? The same way the Buddha taught, with attention, with presence. with the willingness to actually feel what it's like to inhabit this body, right here, right now. Not the body you wish you had, not the body you had 10 years ago, or the body you hope to have 10 years from now. This body, today's body, the only body you actually have. One practice that can be profoundly healing is what's sometimes called the body gratitude scan. Instead of the typical body scan, where you're just noticing sensations, you move through your body offering thanks. You might start with your feet, these feet that have carried me everywhere I've needed to go. Thank you. Your legs that hold you up, that let you move through the world. Thank you. Your belly that processes the food that nourishes you, even when you don't feed it well. Thank you. You move through each part of your body, not with judgment about how it looks, or how it compares to some ideal, but with genuine appreciation for what it does. Your hands that let you touch and create, your eyes that let you see beauty, your ears that bring you music and voices, and the sounds of the world, your heart that has beaten every moment of your life without you having to remember to keep it going. This isn't about pretending you love everything about your body if you don't. It's about shifting attention from criticism to appreciation, from what's wrong to what's working, from deficiency to sufficiency. And what happens when you practice this regularly is remarkable. The relationship begins to soften. The harsh judgment loosens. You start treating your body more kindly, not because you should, but because you genuinely begin to see it is worthy of care. The Buddha also taught about the 5 elements that make up the body: earth, water, fire, air, and space. These aren't just poetic metaphors. They're ways of understanding that your body is not separate from the natural world. The earth element in you is the solid matter, bones and flesh into organs. The water element is all the fluids, blood and lymph and tears. The fire element is the warmth, the metabolism, the transformation. The air element is the breath and the subtle movements. The space element is the gaps, the hollows, the places where things can move and change. When you understand your body this way, as made of the same elements as everything else in nature, the harsh judgment can soften. This body isn't some separate thing that should be different. It's part of the natural world, subject to the same forces, the same processes, the same inevitable changes as everything else. Trees don't judge themselves for losing leaves in autumn. Rivers don't criticize themselves for flowing downhill. Flowers don't hate themselves for blooming and then withering. They just do what they do, following their nature. Your body is the same. It's aging. That's not failure. That's nature. It changes. That's not weakness. That's life. It has limits. That's not inadequacy. That's reality. When you stop fighting these basic facts, when you accept your body as part of nature rather than as a project that needs perfecting, so much suffering falls away. Another practice the Buddha taught is contemplation of the body's elements and processes. This might sound morbid, but it's actually deeply liberating. He taught practitioners to contemplate that the body is made of parts, that it functions through complex processes, that it will eventually die and return to the elements from which it came. Not to create fear or revulsion, but to break through our obsession with the body's appearance and our attachment to youth and perfection. When you really contemplate mortality, when you deeply understand that this body has a limited time, something shifts. The question stops being, is it perfect? and becomes, is it functioning well enough to live the life I want to live? Can I use this body to practice? Can I use it to love, to serve, to learn, to grow? The cosmetic concerns, the constant comparison to others, or to impossible ideals, these begin to seem less urgent. This doesn't mean you stop caring for your body. Actually, the opposite happens. When you truly appreciate the body as precious and temporary, you naturally want to care for it well. Not to make it perfect, but to honor it, to support it in doing what it's here to do. You feed it nourishing food, not out of obsession, but out of care. You move it regularly, not to punish it, but to keep it strong and functional. You rest it when it's tired, not out of laziness, but out of wisdom. And you speak to it differently. Instead of standing in front of the mirror, cataloging flaws, you might place your hand on your heart and say, "Thank you for taking care of me." Instead of cursing your body for being tired, you might say, "I hear you. I'll rest soon." Instead of demanding it be something it's not, you might say you're doing your best, and that's enough. The body is your oldest companion. It's been with you since before you were born, growing you in the womb, carrying you through childhood, sustaining you through everything you've ever experienced. It will be with you until your last breath. And it has never once judged you. It has never told you you're not good enough. It has just kept working, kept trying, kept doing everything it can to keep you alive and functioning. Maybe it's time to return that loyalty. Maybe it's time to treat your body with the respect and kindness it has always offered you. Not someday when it looks different or functions better. Today. Right now. This breath, this heartbeat, this moment of being alive in a body that is doing its absolute best for you. Feel your body now. Not with judgment, just with awareness. Notice where it's touching the surface beneath you. Notice the temperature of your skin. Notice your breath moving, your heart beating. This is your body. Precious, temporary. Worthy of love not because it's perfect, but because it's yours, and it's here, and it's alive. Thank you, body, for everything. For all of this, there's a word in the Buddhist text that appears again and again when discussing obstacles to practice, obstacles to peace, obstacles to awakening. That word is hiri ottappa in its positive form, moral conscience and concern for consequences. But in its distorted form, the sensitivity becomes something toxic. It becomes what we in the West call shame, the deep, pervasive belief that you are fundamentally flawed, fundamentally unworthy, fundamentally broken. Shame is different from guilt. Guilt says, I did something wrong. Shame says, I am something wrong. Guilt is about actions. Shame is about identity. Guilt can be healthy. It motivates repair and change. Shame is almost always destructive. It creates paralysis, hiding, and self-hatred. And if you've grown up in certain religious or cultural contexts, shame might be woven so deeply into your sense of self that you don't even recognize it as something separate from who you are. The Buddha encountered this in his own time, though perhaps not as severely as we experience it in modern Western culture. There were practitioners who came to him convinced they were too defiled, too sinful, too far gone to ever awaken. He had to work with them to unravel this belief before they could even begin genuine practice. Because shame creates a vicious cycle. You believe you're bad, so you hide, so you can't receive help or connection. So you feel more isolated and bad, and the cycle continues. Breaking this cycle requires understanding where shame comes from and how it operates. Shame often begins in childhood, in moments when you were made to feel that your very existence was wrong. Not just that you did something wrong, but that you being you was wrong. Maybe it was explicit messages. You're too loud, too quiet, too much, too little, too sensitive, too demanding. Maybe it was more subtle. The feeling of being unwanted, of being a burden, of taking up space you didn't deserve. Shame is also cultural. If you grew up in a religious tradition that taught original sin, the belief that you're born sinful and need salvation, shame is baked into your worldview. If you're part of a marginalized group, society itself might have taught you shame about your identity, your body, your desires, your very existence. If you're from a culture that values perfection and achievement above all, shame becomes the constant companion of anything less than extraordinary success. Buddhism offers a radically different view. The Buddha taught that our fundamental nature is not sinful or defective. We have what's called Buddha nature, the potential for awakening, the capacity for wisdom and compassion. We're not broken beings who need fixing. We're confused beings who need clarifying. We're not evil beings who need punishment. We're suffering beings who need understanding and care. But knowing this intellectually doesn't immediately dissolve shame that's been forming for decades. The work of releasing shame requires patience, compassion, and often support. Because shame thrives in secrecy and isolation. It tells you that if anyone really saw you, really knew you, they would reject you. And so you hide, you perform. You present a carefully curated version of yourself, while the shame-filled parts remain locked away, growing more toxic in the darkness. The antidote to shame, according to both Buddhist teaching and modern psychology, is radical honesty combined with compassion. This doesn't mean you announce all your deepest secrets to the world, but it means finding safe places, safe people, where you can be honest about your struggles, your mistakes, your humanity, where you can stop performing and just be seen. In traditional Buddhist practice, this took the form of confession. Monks and nuns would regularly confess their violations of precepts to each other, not to be punished, but to bring the violations into the light, to release the burden of carrying them in secret. The practice assumed that everyone makes mistakes. Everyone acts unskillfully at times, and hiding these mistakes only makes them heavier. You can adapt this practice for your own healing. You might work with a therapist, a spiritual teacher, or a trusted friend. You might write in a journal, being completely honest about the things you're most ashamed of. The practice isn't about dwelling in shame or reinforcing it. It's about exposing it to the light, where it begins to lose its power. A Tibetan Buddhist practice called Lojong includes a slogan that says, "Drive all blames into one." This sounds harsh at first, like you should blame yourself for everything. But the actual meaning is different. It's saying that all your suffering, all your struggles, come from one source, your own mind, your own clinging and aversion, your own confusion. Not to make you feel guilty, but to empower you. If your mind creates your suffering, your mind can also liberate you from it. Applied to shame, this means recognizing that shame isn't truth about you. It's a pattern in your mind. It's conditioning you absorbed. It's a habit of thought you can work with and change. You're not fundamentally shameful. You're experiencing shame. And like all experiences, this one can be transformed. One of the most powerful practices for working with shame is what's called feeding your demons from the Chod tradition. Instead of fighting shame or trying to exile it, you actually turn toward it with curiosity. You ask it, "What do you need? What are you trying to protect me from? What would help you relax?" And often, you discover that shame, like the inner critic, is trying in its unskillful way to keep you safe. It believes that if it can make you feel bad enough, small enough, hidden enough, you won't be hurt by others' rejection. But shame's strategy doesn't work. It just creates more suffering. So you can thank shame for trying to protect you, and then offer it what it actually needs. Not more hiding, but genuine connection. Not more self-attack, but self-compassion. Not more isolation, but belonging. As you practice this, shame begins to transform. It doesn't disappear overnight, but it loosens its grip. You catch glimpses of yourself beyond the shame, of your fundamental worthiness that shame tried to hide. The Buddha taught that we contain multitudes. We have seeds of kindness and seeds of cruelty, seeds of wisdom and seeds of delusion, seeds of generosity and seeds of greed. What grows is what we water. If you've been watering shame for years, feeding it with attention and belief and reinforcement, it makes sense that it's grown strong and pervasive. But you can choose differently. You can start watering the seeds of self-compassion, of basic goodness, of unconditional self-acceptance. This isn't about positive thinking or affirmations that feel fake. It's about genuinely investigating the nature of shame and seeing through it. When shame says you're fundamentally defective, you can ask, is that actually true? How do I know? What evidence contradicts this? When shame tries to keep you isolated, you can deliberately reach out. Take the risk of being seen. When shame tells you you don't deserve care, you can practice caring for yourself anyway, building evidence that contradicts shame's narrative. Over time, the balance shifts. Shame doesn't have to disappear completely for you to live a free life. But it can become one voice among many instead of the dominant force. You can have shame arise and recognize, oh, there's that pattern again, without being consumed by it, without believing it automatically, without letting it determine your actions. The key is persistence combined with gentleness. You're undoing potentially decades of conditioning. This work doesn't happen in a weekend workshop or a 10-day retreat. It happens through daily practice, through consistently meeting shame with compassion instead of reinforcement, through slowly building a different relationship with yourself. And remember, you're not alone in this. The shame you carry might feel uniquely yours, but the experience of shame is universal. Everyone struggles with some version of feeling not good enough, feeling unworthy, feeling fundamentally flawed. When you begin to talk about it, when you break the isolation shame creates, you discover that your shame isn't proof of your defectiveness. It's proof of your humanity. The Buddha's final teaching was reportedly, work out your liberation with diligence, not with self-punishment, not with shame, with diligence, with patient, consistent effort, with the understanding that you are worthy of the work it takes to free yourself, not after you're perfect, not once you've fixed everything, right now, exactly as you are, shame and all, human and all, imperfect and all. You are worthy of liberation. Let that truth sink in deeper than any shame ever has. The teacher stands in front of the meditation hall every morning. The students arrive, some early, some rushing in at the last moment. Some sit immediately in perfect posture. Others fidget and adjust for several minutes. The teacher watches all of this with warm attention. And at the end of the day, the teacher doesn't announce who meditated best, who had the deepest concentration, who is clearly the most advanced practitioner. The teacher simply says, "Thank you for practicing." This is what a life of self-love looks like in practice. Not a destination you reach after years of work, not a state of perfect peace and self-acceptance that you achieve and then maintain forever, but a practice, something you return to again and again, sometimes easily, sometimes with great difficulty, sometimes feeling it deeply, sometimes just going through the motions and trusting that the motions themselves matter. Buddhist practice is always emphasizing this quality of daily return, daily recommitment, daily choice. You don't meditate once and become enlightened. You sit down on your cushion thousands of times. You return to your breath thousands of times. You notice your mind wandering and bring it back thousands of times. This repetition isn't failure. It's the practice. The same is true for healing your relationship with yourself. You don't hear one teaching or have one insight and suddenly transform from self-criticism to self-love. You catch yourself in judgment thousands of times. You choose kindness over cruelty thousands of times. You practice again and again, meeting yourself with compassion instead of contempt. Some days this will feel natural. You'll wake up with a sense of ease, move through your day treating yourself well, handle mistakes with grace, and lie down at night feeling genuinely at peace with who you are. Other days will be brutal. The critic will be loud and relentless. You'll forget everything you've learned. You'll fall into old patterns of self-attack and believe every harsh word. This variation is normal. This is what practice looks like. The key is persistence, but a gentle persistence. Not the harsh, demanding kind that says you should be better at this by now, but the kind that says, "I'm still learning. I'm still practicing. Today was hard. Tomorrow I'll try again." This persistence is itself an act of self-love, the refusal to give up on yourself even when you stumble. So what does daily practice actually look like? It's different for everyone, but here are some practices you might integrate into your routine. Morning intention setting. Before you check your phone, before you get caught in the day's demands, take 2 minutes to set an intention. How do you want to relate to yourself today? You might say something like, "Today I practice meeting myself with kindness," or "Today I remember my worth isn't based on productivity," or simply, "Today I practice being gentle with myself." Mindful moments throughout the day. You don't need hour-long meditation sessions, though those are valuable too. You need moments of awareness. When you're washing your hands, really wash them. Feel the water, notice the sensations. When you're walking to your car, take 3 conscious breaths. These micro-practices interrupt the autopilot mode, where self-criticism runs rampant. Check-ins with your inner experience. Set reminders on your phone, or link them to regular activities. Every time you make coffee, check in with yourself. How am I feeling? What do I need right now? Am I being kind to myself, or cruel? These quick check-ins build self-awareness and give you opportunities to course-correct before you spiral into hours of self-attack. Evening reflection. Before sleep, take 5 minutes to review your day. Not with judgment, but with curiosity. Where did I treat myself well today? Where did I struggle? What can I learn? What am I grateful for? This reflection helps consolidate the learning and ensures you're not just mindlessly repeating patterns. The Buddhist practice of beginning again is crucial here. In meditation, When your mind wanders, you don't berate yourself. You simply note thinking and return to the breath, again and again, thousands of times in a single session. This is training in beginning again without judgment, and you can apply this to everything. When you catch yourself in harsh self-criticism, you don't need to criticize yourself for being critical. You just begin again. Oh, there's that pattern. Let me try a different response. This practice of beginning again is what transforms daily life into spiritual practice. Every moment becomes an opportunity. Every mistake becomes a chance to practice self-compassion. Every harsh thought becomes an invitation to choose differently. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is failure. Everything is material for awakening. But you also need to be realistic about the obstacles you'll face. Some days you won't feel like practicing. The compassionate response isn't to force yourself harshly. It's to acknowledge, I don't feel like this today, and that's okay. I'll do what I can. Maybe today the practice is just being kind about not practicing. Some days old trauma will surface and self-love will feel impossible. Old wounds don't heal on a schedule. This is when you might need additional support, therapy, community, someone who can hold space for the pain that's too big to hold alone. Some days you'll believe you're not making any progress, that you're just as self-critical as you were months or years ago. This is when you need to zoom out and look at the larger arc. Have there been any changes, however small? Do you recover more quickly from self-attack? Are there moments, even brief ones, of genuine self-kindness? This is progress. Not linear, not dramatic, but real. The Buddha talked about gradual training. He used the metaphor of the ocean, how the shore slopes gently and gradually into the depths. No sudden drops, no cliffs. Just a slow, steady deepening. That's how this practice works. You don't wake up one day completely transformed. You wake up many days slightly different, barely noticeably different, until you look back and realize how far you've come. Community is part of daily practice too. Buddhism has always emphasized Sangha, spiritual community, as one of the 3 refugees. You take refuge in the Buddha, the awakened nature. You take refuge in the Dharma, the teachings and the truth. And you take refuge in the Sangha, the community of practitioners. Because you can't do this alone. You need mirrors. You need support. You need people who believe in your capacity for awakening, even when you've forgotten it. Find your Sangha. Maybe it's a meditation group. Maybe it's therapy. Maybe it's a few trusted friends who understand what you're working on. Maybe it's online communities. Maybe it's all of these. The form matters less than the function. Having people who can witness your struggle, reflect your progress, and remind you that you're not alone. And remember, daily practice doesn't mean perfect practice. The Tibetan teacher Trungpa Rinpoche coined the term spiritual materialism to describe how we can turn practice into another ego project, another way to prove we're good enough. When you practice with that energy, you've missed the point entirely. You're just feeding the same pattern in different clothes. The practice is to keep catching this, to notice when you're being hard on yourself about not being compassionate enough to yourself, to see the irony and meet it with humor and gentleness. The whole point is to relax the endless striving, the constant self-improvement project, the belief that you need to become someone different before you're acceptable. You're acceptable now. You're worthy now. The practice isn't about earning that. It's about remembering it again and again, until the remembering becomes more natural than the forgetting. Some days you'll remember easily. Some days it will feel impossible. Both kinds of days are the practice. Both are opportunities. Both are your life unfolding exactly as it needs to. Trust the process. Trust your commitment. Trust that every moment of kindness you offer yourself matters, even when you can't feel it mattering. You're rewiring your brain, changing neural pathways formed over decades. You're healing wounds that go soul deep. You're transforming your fundamental relationship with yourself. This is profound work. This is life-changing work. And it happens one day, one breath, one choice at a time. So tomorrow morning, when you wake up, before the critic starts its daily commentary, take one breath and remember, you are practicing. You are learning. You are worthy of your own kindness. And today, like every day, is another chance to begin again. To choose love over judgment. To choose compassion over cruelty. To choose the path of awakening over the path of self-destruction. This is your practice. This is your life. And you are doing it right now. Every moment you choose awareness over autopilot, kindness over cruelty, compassion over judgment, you are transforming. Not into someone different, into who you've always been beneath the layers of conditioning, into your true nature, which has always been and will always be fundamentally whole. The transformation that happens when you genuinely learn to love yourself ripples outward in ways you cannot predict or control. You think you're just working on your relationship with yourself, just trying to be less harsh, just learning to treat yourself better. But you're actually changing the entire web of your relationships, because when you stop being at war with yourself, you stop being at war with everyone else. Think about it. When you're locked in constant self-criticism, when you're vigilantly monitoring yourself for flaws and inadequacies, you're doing the same to everyone around you. You might not realize it, but the harsh judge that lives in your head doesn't stay contained there. It looks outward too. It compares. It evaluates. It finds others lacking in the same ways it finds you lacking. This is what the Buddha meant when he taught that hatred never ceases by hatred, but by love alone is healed. The hatred you direct at yourself creates a pervasive atmosphere of hostility that affects everything. Your partner can feel it even when you're not criticizing them directly. Your children absorb it. Your friends sense it. You bring this energy of never being enough to every interaction, and it shapes those interactions in subtle but powerful ways. But when you begin to soften toward yourself, when you start meeting your imperfection with compassion instead of contempt, something remarkable happens. You become less judgmental of others, not because you're trying to, not because you've made a decision to be more accepting, but because the mechanism of harsh judgment begins to quiet. When you can hold your own mistakes with kindness, you naturally extend that same quality to the mistakes of others. You become more patient. When someone is struggling or making errors, you don't immediately judge them because you've learned to not immediately judge yourself. You become more forgiving. When someone hurts you, you can see their humanity, their confusion, their own suffering, because you've learned to see your own instead of just attacking it. You become more present. When you're not constantly lost in self-referential thinking, constantly monitoring and evaluating yourself, you actually have attention available to truly be with other people. The Buddha taught Metta, loving kindness, in 5 stages. Remember, you begin with yourself. then extend it to loved ones, then neutral people, then difficult people, then all beings everywhere. But here's what's not always emphasized. Each stage depends on the one before it. If you can't genuinely feel metta for yourself, your metta for others will be hollow. It will be performance, not genuine warmth. But when you've truly cultivated loving kindness for yourself, the other stages flow naturally. It's not work anymore. It's overflow. When your heart is full of kindness for yourself, that kindness spills out. It can't be contained. You naturally want others to be happy, to be free from suffering, because you've tasted what it's like to wish that for yourself and to actually mean it. This is what the Buddha meant when he said that self-love and love for others aren't opposed. They're the same thing expressing in different directions. You can't have one without the other. If you claim to love all beings while hating yourself, you're lying. The self-hatred will leak out in countless subtle ways. But if you genuinely love yourself, you cannot help but extend that love to others, because you've seen that everyone is struggling with the same fundamental issues. Everyone wants to be happy and free from suffering. Everyone is doing their best with the tools and understanding they have. Your relationships transform in specific, observable ways. You stop people-pleasing, desperately trying to get others to approve of you because you don't approve of yourself. Instead, you can be authentic. You can say no when you need to. You can express your genuine thoughts and feelings, instead of constantly calculating what will make others like you. Paradoxically, this authenticity makes you more lovable, not less, because people can finally meet the real you. You stop taking everything personally. When someone is critical or distant or upset, you don't immediately spiral into what did I do wrong? Why don't they like me? What's wrong with me? Instead, you can recognize that their reaction is about them, their day, their struggles, their own inner landscape. You can offer compassion without absorbing their state as evidence of your inadequacy. You stop trying to fix everyone. When you were trying to fix yourself constantly, seeing yourself as a problem needing solution, you naturally approached others the same way. But when you accept yourself as fundamentally okay, even while still learning and growing, you can extend that acceptance to others. You can let people be on their own journey instead of trying to manage their experience for them. You become a safe person for others to be vulnerable with. When you've learned to hold your own imperfection with compassion, people unconsciously sense that you can hold theirs too. They feel safe being honest with you, making mistakes around you, being themselves without performance. You become the kind of person others turn to, not for advice or fixing, but for genuine presence and understanding. Your intimate relationships deepen. Whether it's romantic partnership, deep friendship, or family bonds, the quality of intimacy changes when you're no longer hiding yourself. When you can be vulnerable about your struggles without shame, when you can acknowledge mistakes without collapsing, when you can ask for what you need without believing you don't deserve to have needs, real intimacy becomes possible. But here's something important. This transformation isn't about becoming some perfectly selfless, endlessly giving person who never has boundaries or needs. That's another form of self-abandonment. The transformation is about becoming real, becoming whole, recognizing that you're a being among beings, no more important, but also no less important than anyone else. You matter. Your needs matter. Your well-being matters. And so does everyone else's. This is what the Buddha called the middle way in relationships. Not sacrificing yourself for others, not prioritizing yourself at others' expense, but the fluid, moment-by-moment dance of caring for both yourself and others as the situation requires. Sometimes you need to prioritize your needs. Sometimes others' needs take precedence. This isn't calculated or strategic. It flows naturally from a place of balance, and the impact extends beyond your personal relationships. When you're no longer burning all your energy on self-attack and self-defense, you have resources available for the world. You can engage with social issues, with service, with activism, not from a place of desperate need to prove you're a good person, but from genuine care. You can offer your gifts, whatever they are, without needing validation that you're special or important. You can contribute simply because you're part of this web of existence, and your contribution matters. This is what the Buddha pointed to when he taught about the ending of suffering. It's not just your individual suffering that ends. It's the suffering you were spreading, unconsciously, through every interaction. When your inner peace deepens, peace ripples outward. It touches everyone you meet, not because you're preaching at them or trying to fix them, but because you're no longer adding your confusion and hostility to the collective atmosphere. You become a space of calm in the storm, and that matters more than you can possibly measure. The greatest gift you can give anyone is your own healing, your own peace, your own wholeness, not because it makes you special or superior, but because it removes one more source of harm from the world and adds one more source of compassion. The Buddha taught that just as a lamp doesn't discriminate about what it illuminates, it just shines. Your peace, when genuine, will naturally illuminate everything around you. So this work of learning to love yourself, of transforming self-criticism into self-compassion, this isn't selfish. This isn't navel-gazing. This isn't ignoring the world's suffering to focus on your own comfort. This is the most generous thing you can do. This is how you stop perpetuating cycles of pain. This is how you become part of the healing, instead of part of the harm. Every moment you choose kindness toward yourself, you make kindness more possible for everyone you encounter. Every time you meet your imperfection with compassion, you model for others that their imperfection doesn't make them unworthy. Every instance of genuine self-love strengthens the field of love that holds all beings. You are not separate. The peace you cultivate internally doesn't stay internal. It radiates, it influences, it heals. This is the secret at the heart of Buddhist practice. When you truly wake up, when you genuinely transform your relationship with yourself, you discover that yourself was never as separate as you thought. You are woven into everything, and your healing is everyone's healing. This is why the Buddha, after his awakening, didn't just sit in peaceful bliss. He spent 45 years teaching, traveling, offering what he'd discovered to anyone willing to listen. Not because he needed to, not because he wasn't complete, but because when you truly wake up, the natural response is to help others wake up too. Not from obligation or should, but from love. So as you walk this path of learning to love yourself, know that you're not just doing it for you. You're doing it for everyone who will benefit from meeting a person who has stopped being at war with themselves. Everyone who will feel safer being authentic around you. Everyone who will be touched by your peace without ever knowing why they feel calmer in your presence. You are healing the world by healing yourself. This is not metaphor. This is truth. And here, at the end of this journey we've taken together, you find yourself exactly where you started. In your body. In this moment. Still breathing. Still alive. Still the same person who began listening, but not the same at all. Because something has shifted, even if you can't name it yet. Some possibility has opened. Some old pattern has loosened its grip, just slightly. Some part of you has heard truth it needed to hear. The Buddha taught that all of his teachings could be summarized in a few words. Nothing is worth clinging to. Everything changes. You are not as separate as you think you are. And suffering can end. Not suffering as in pain or difficulty. Those are part of life. But suffering as in the extra layer of torment we add to pain through our resistance, our judgment, our belief that things should be different than they are. The self-criticism you've carried, the harsh inner voice that has haunted you, this is optional suffering. You can't stop thoughts from arising. You can't prevent moments of doubt or difficulty. But you can stop adding the second arrow, the one that says, "You're not good enough. You should be better. You're fundamentally flawed." That arrow you have a choice about, every single time. This doesn't mean the path is easy or quick. The Buddha himself said that his teaching is profound, hard to see, hard to understand. Not because it's complex philosophically, but because it goes against everything we've been conditioned to believe. We've been taught that harsh self-judgment keeps us on track. We've been taught that we need to earn our worth. We've been taught that self-love is selfish. Undoing these beliefs, rewiring these patterns, takes time and patience and consistent practice. But it's possible. Not someday, not after you've fixed yourself, not once you've become perfect. Right now, in this moment. You can choose to meet yourself with kindness instead of cruelty. You can choose to see your thoughts as temporary events instead of permanent truths. You can choose to recognize your fundamental worthiness even while acknowledging areas where you want to grow. This is the revolution. Not out in the world, though that may come too, but inside. In the most intimate relationship you have, the one with yourself. When that relationship transforms from hostility to friendliness, from violence to kindness, everything else shifts in response. Your relationships improve. Your creativity flows more freely. Your energy increases because you're not spending it on an internal war. Your peace deepens because you've stopped fighting the fundamental fact of your existence. The practices we've explored tonight, understanding Anatta and the constructed nature of self, cultivating Metta beginning with yourself, recognizing the origins of your inner critic, walking the middle way between self-indulgence and self-punishment, developing mindfulness of your inner voice, transforming judgment into wisdom, healing your relationship with your body, working with shame and unworthiness, establishing daily practices, and recognizing how self-love ripples outward. These aren't just concepts to understand intellectually. They're practices to live, to embody, to return to again and again. You don't need to do all of them at once. You don't need to be perfect at any of them. You just need to start. Pick one practice that resonated most deeply. Maybe it's the morning intention setting. Maybe it's the body gratitude scan. Maybe it's simply noticing when self-criticism arises and saying thinking instead of believing it. Start there. Build from there. Trust that each small choice towards self-compassion matters. And remember, you are not doing this alone. Across the world, across time, Countless beings have walked this path before you. The Buddha walked it. Every awakened teacher has walked it. Every person who has ever healed their relationship with themselves has walked it. You are part of this lineage, the Sangha of practitioners, this community of beings learning to meet life with an open heart. The path is here. The door is unlocked. All that's needed is your willingness to step through, to try something different, to treat yourself with the kindness you've always deserved, but perhaps never received, to remember, again and again, that your worth is not conditional. It never has been. It never will be. You are worthy of love, not because of what you do, or achieve, or become. You are worthy of love because you are alive, because you are here, because you are part of this mysterious, beautiful, difficult, precious experience called human life. May you walk this path with gentleness. May you meet yourself with compassion. May you discover the freedom that comes from finally laying down the burden of self-hatred. May you know, in your bones, in your heart, in the deepest core of your being, that you are enough. You have always been enough, and you will always be enough. This is the teaching. This is the path. This is the truth that liberates. Thank you for practicing with me tonight. Thank you for your courage in facing these difficult patterns. Thank you for your commitment to healing. The world needs your peace. The world needs your wholeness. The world needs you, exactly as you are. Learning to love yourself one moment, one breath, one choice at a time. If this exploration has touched something in you, if it's offered even a moment of relief from the constant self-judgment, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these teachings reach others who are struggling with the same patterns, who need to hear that they're not alone, that change is possible, that they too are worthy of love and peace. Share this with someone who might benefit. Leave a comment about your own journey with self-criticism and self-compassion. Let's build a community of practitioners supporting each other in this profound work of learning to be kind to ourselves. Until we meet again, may you be safe. May you be peaceful. May you be healthy. May you be free from suffering. And may you always remember you are worthy. You are whole. You are enough. Rest well.